Sim versus reality. I've been playing Gran Turismo since the late 90s because it gives me access to dream cars like this 992 generation GT3 RS and allows me to drive a car like that around a circuit like this. But I've always wondered just how close it is to reality. And that's what we're here today to find out. Before we go any further, I want to say a massive thanks to the Porsche GB press team for trusting me with their £250,000 Guards Red GT3 RS. I also want to say a massive thanks to Michelin. Today we're going to be running a Pilot Sport Cup 2 tyre, which is an N-Mark version, therefore homologated, designed and developed for that weapon behind me. We're out here with RMA Track Days. They're also a partner of Michelin UK. They've been running track days for 35 years. And Leighton, who's in charge, has also got a GT3 RS, although his one's been turned up a little bit more and is running Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2Rs. There are a couple of things to discuss before we jump in the car. For instance, this doesn't have a reset button. If I stack it going through Eau Rouge, all I'm left with is a very awkward phone call to Rory and James at Porsche GB. Whereas on the sim, I have an unlimited amount of chances of getting it right. I can just keep pressing the reset button. So I'm going to approach my sim laps as if I'm in the real car. Let's jump in and familiarize ourselves with this car and with this circuit in real life. Right, here we are out at Spa in potentially the best road legal track tool available to buy. Porsche's 992 generation GT3 RS. I never ever thought or dreamt that I'd get the opportunity to do this. What is this car? Well, it's Porsche's most track focused 911. It has the wonderful 4-litre flat six that revs to 9,000 RPM, produces 510 horsepower, and sounds absolutely glorious, as I'm sure you'll agree. What makes this car so special and so good out on track is the ridiculous amounts of aero it has. As you can probably tell by the massive wing that hangs out the back. Oh my goodness. It's just insane, this car. As is this circuit. The brakes, everything. There's a few wet patches because it rained a bit earlier on. And it's taking a while to dry out, so I'm being a little bit cautious. I'm going to hopefully set some faster laps later after lunch. What an experience. What a car, what a circuit, what incredible tyres. Porsche engineers can do everything in the world and throw the kitchen sink at this car, which they have done. But remember, the most important part of it, or the only part of it that connects the car to the tarmac, is the tyre. And to think that Michelin do a more extreme version of the Cup 2, the Cup 2R, I just can't begin to imagine what that is like, because I don't think I've discovered anywhere close to the limits of this car or of this tyre. Right, let's go and jump on the sim. Oh, that was fun. Now, let's see what it's like on the sim. Let's just get ready. It's, oh yeah, I've still got my helmet on. I probably don't need the helmet. Right then, you join me in a Guards Red 992 GT3 RS. Exactly the same as the one that I just got out of. In fact, the weather looks very, very similar. And that's because we've set everything up, including the car, the spec, the weather, to be almost identical to what we have outside. Also, the tyres. We're running sport hards because Pat and I believe sport hards are the closest tyre in the game that replicate a Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2. Let's peel out of the pit lane. This is weird because the last time I was here was in real life. I could spot some differences. There are lots of people out here watching me. I think that's Pat up there. Hey Pat, I hope he's getting some good shots of me. Right, as we come down towards Eau Rouge, and before we start really pushing on, I want to take this opportunity to thank my good friend Tim Morley, who provided me with this gorgeous carbon sim rig. It's from his company, which is called Effect Simulations. I'll put a link to them in the description below. He actually sent me this sim rig out about 18 months ago to film this comparison video, and well, we're only getting around to doing it now. Back then, it wasn't with such a awesome car, so I'm kind of glad that we're patient and we're doing it properly. This is going to be really interesting, I think, especially at the end when I've managed to put a decent lap together on the sim. Just looking and comparing the real thing and the sim lap, because they do feel scarily similar. Gear changes, braking points, all the rest of it. The only thing you don't feel, obviously, on this sim, because it's not a motion sim, is things like G-forces. So we're going through Pouon here, which in real life, when you're pushing on, you can feel a lot of G-forces. Also on the brakes, especially with the GT3 RS, it slows down so well. You just don't get those sensations. The way it's completely blind when we go up here, you can't see anything until here. As we're getting towards the end of this outlap, what I plan to do is stop talking and focus. I'm going to give myself 8 to 10 laps to get what I think is a really good lap out of this car and these conditions. Let's come back in the pits. Hopefully Pat has a cold bottle of water waiting for me. Then we can head back out in the real thing and hopefully set a decent benchmark lap that we can compare at the end of the video. Right then, I'm going to shut up and go for a push lap. joined me a few months later, and I still can't believe that that happened. And after putting the edit together and placing a time against my real life lap, well, it appears I'm almost exactly 1 second slower in real life than I was on the sim. And we're going to break all of that down in a minute. Aside from it being an absolutely mega day, I hope you can appreciate that Patrick and I had our work cut out for us. We're up against it time-wise and weather-wise because there was some rain due in the afternoon. And when I went out for my push laps, well, I didn't manage to find a completely clear lap. And that's not because the RMA track day was congested, not at all. It just seemed that I was catching people at the wrong place at the wrong time on each push lap. And then I ran out of fuel, or got fuel starvation, on the exit of Pouhon. And for those of you eagle-eyed viewers, you might have noticed that I cut and pasted 2 different laps together. So essentially one half up to the exit of Pouhon and another half from Pouhon until the end. To make things really tricky after I'd experienced that fuel surge, I obviously had to pit, fill up with fuel, we had to reset the cameras, and I had to head back out before the rain arrived. And thankfully, on my second lap out, I managed to get a clear second half of the lap, which is the one that you see here. Although I did make a mistake into the final bus stop chicane, carry a bit too much speed, potentially the car weighing about an extra 50 kilos with the fuel just upset the weight transfer and balance a little bit, and it turned into a bit of a skid. And obviously skids, slides, etc. are fun, but they're no good when you're up against the stopwatch. Now this is where things start to get really interesting. We have the sim lap at the top and the real lap at the bottom, and I've edited this so that both cars cross the start finish line at exactly the same frame. I'm going to narrate through the majority of this lap with you lot, but at the end of the video I'll put this clip back up uninterrupted so you can watch it, because the similarities are uncanny. Here we go. Start finish there. Coming into turn 1. We hit the apex at exactly the same time. Maybe not surprising because that's only the first 300 or 400 meters of the track. We're now coming into Eau Rouge. I get there slightly before in the real car and exit Eau Rouge maybe a 10th or 2 sooner or quicker than the sim lap. VMAX along the Kemmel Straight. Let's just pause it there. In fact, there. 261 indicated in the real car, 260 on the sim lap. Almost identical in terms of track position. There's the 100 meter board, 100 meter board. There's no more than a meter or 2 in it at this point. Apex, same. This section is just identical. I'm probably going to say that a lot during this lap. Coming into Brussels, I think they call this. I was going quite wide with a late apex. I probably nailed it a little bit better in the real car. And we're coming through turn 9, which I think they call Jackie X today. We'll just pause it on the exit a little bit further. There we go. Now, as you can see and hopefully appreciate, again, there is no more than a foot, I wouldn't even say a metre of difference between the two cars. Bear in mind we're well over a minute into the lap and the real life, the sim, are identical. Okay, I'm carrying a bit more speed in the real car, indicated speed 162 versus 156, but otherwise very, very similar. We're now coming down into Pouon, which is one of the most enjoyable and scary double corners at Spa. And on the exit is where I join the two laps in real life together. Just coming through the last part of Pouon here, just before I get fuel starvation. And we'll see that once again, in real life, I'm actually carrying about 10 kilometers per hour extra speed, but in terms of actual placement on the circuit, on the track, there's not much in it. I would say that my real life lap is actually maybe half a car length now. So let's say 2.5 meters ahead of the sim lap. Clearly made up a little bit of time on the sim, because as we come through here, I would say once again, they are identical. In fact, if we use that white building in the distance as a reference, well, it's in exactly the same place. And my vision down to the next corner is exactly the same. It's unreal. It really is. This section's tricky on the sim, and it's really tricky in real life. I'm an amateur around Spa. My first time there, so it was a steep learning curve. Even though I knew it well on the sim, I was an amateur in real life. Now we're approaching Blanchimont, which is a really, really scary corner. And in fact, let's just go back a few frames before we get on the brakes. Maybe about there. And you can see we're top of fifth, 8,500 RPM. The GT3 RS red lines at 9,000. 246 clicks in the sim, 249 in real life. So next to no difference. This is where I potentially make my first small mistake, and a pro driver, someone like Leighton, certainly would be carrying a lot more speed through here than I am. I overbrake a little bit, if you like. So let's just get to the apex, and you can see my real life lap is 202, whereas in the sim I'm at 209, and I'm already on full throttle at this point, whereas I think I'm just bleeding onto the throttle in real life. I think the sim has about a car length of advantage at this point, and you can imagine that I'm going to carry that in the sim all the way down to the final bus stop chicane. In fact, it's probably going to stretch a little bit just due to the nature of me getting off the corner out of Blanchimont quicker on the sim. You can already hear me braking earlier. So I'm at the apex, the first part of the chicane on the simulator, and again I'm at least a car length away in real life. So that mistake at Blanchimont is now carried on to the chicane and grown a little bit. That's exactly what you would expect. But we're only talking maybe a tenth and a half in terms of time here. But this is where I make my big mistake. I come in a bit too greedy, upset the balance of the car. You can already see that the car in real life, the one at the bottom, is pointing towards the pit lane. It's because I've got too much rotation in there. The weight and the balance of the car is a little bit upset. So then when I turn left, all of that energy quickly runs to the right-hand side of the GT3 RS, and the Cup 2s cry enough at that point. I'm asking too much. We're only doing 77 kilometers per hour, so under 50 miles an hour. The aero isn't massively working at those speeds and physics basically give way. I get that slide, and although at the apex of this second part of the chicane, I've somehow actually managed to gain a little bit of time just from that extra momentum and energy. Unfortunately, a lot of that energy is still going to the right, whereas the sim is, well, all set up and I'm just picking up the throttle in the sim now, whereas the real life lap, I'm having to gather everything up and just make sure I don't spin out. So as the sim accelerates and is out towards the rumble strip here, I'm only just getting back on the power in real life, and I've lost a chunk of time, a relative chunk of time at that point. Also, the GT3 RS has a fabulous NA 4-litre flat 6 that has all of its power, all of its torque up in the rev range, let's say 6,000 to 9,000. And at the apex there, I'm at about 4,500. When you add in a slide, the whole car just bogged down a little bit, and yeah, we lost a chunk of time there. As you'll see, when we cross the finish line, sim has crossed the finish line, and I would say that's 4.5 car lengths away from the real lap, which, as we know, equates to about a second. So although they are ridiculously close, you can see where I lost the majority of my lap time, or the majority of that second, at the end of the real life lap. And in fact, in places at the start of the lap, at least for the first half of the lap, I was a fraction ahead of the sim lap. Really, really interesting. I found that fascinating anyway. And make sure, like I said, you hang around to the end if you want to watch that lap uninterrupted without me talking over it, because there are some points where they are in identical places on the track doing identical speeds, and sometimes you'll get identical gear changes. And what this has confirmed, to me at least, is that Gran Turismo 7 is massively realistic and close to the real thing. A lot of people ask me where I've gained my ability on track over the years, and I'm not saying I'm a driving god, far from it, but I've always had decent ability in various cars on track. And I put most of that down to playing Gran Turismo many, many years ago, way before I had the money or means to get out on track in real life. Also, some go-karting helped in the younger years. That teaches you a lot about car control, and it's something that I would always recommend to anyone that is looking at doing a bit of track driving or getting into racing. You look at all the top Formula One drivers, and they've all been karting champions over the years. It really does teach you a lot about car control. But combining karting with something like Gran Turismo 7, well, it's just incredible how much you can learn before you get out there and do the real thing. I want to say a massive thanks to Michelin UK for funding this project that Patrick and I took on. As you can imagine, it took a lot of planning and things to come together, and I'm really, really pleased and impressed with the results that we managed to get. Leighton and his team from RMA Track Day put on such a brilliant event. I'll put a link to those guys in the description below. If you're looking at doing a track day in the UK or at somewhere like Spa, then make sure you check them out. My good friend Tim Morley for hooking us up with that beautiful carbon fibre effect simulations rig. It's still out in the garage, but it will be making its way into the living room for the winter months ahead. That's what's so great about a sim, is you can drive it during the misery of winter and hopefully sharpen up your skills for next year's track days. Once again, I'll put a link to effect simulations in the description below. The boys and girls down at the Porsche GB press team for letting me take their gorgeous GT3 RS out to Spa. My final thanks goes to you lot for supporting me over the years. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Something like 75% of my viewership aren't subscribed. Hit that button, it's free. Hit the bell icon. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Leave any comments, questions and suggestions below, and I'll see you at another video very, very soon. I'm going to play this for you uninterrupted. Enjoy. Did you see that? Oh.